We'll go into that today, though. But my pleasure to welcome our first speaker then on stage. A longtime friend, former business partner. He was quoted by our president earlier this year, who referred to his no-holds-barred, gloves-off Facebook post on land expropriation. So he's well-known in the media industry. He's an expert on the future world of work, the disruptive forces that are shaping it. He's a board advisor, a presenter, and an author. It's none other than Dr. Graeme Codrington talking to us today about disruption in the workplace and the importance of corporate citizenship. Why don't you give Graeme a big round of applause? Graeme.
Watch yourself there. hit with an idea.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here and great that so many people have taken out some time today to think about where South Africa is, to think about South Africa matters, things that matter to South Africa and what we can do to make South Africa matter as well. Thank you for taking that time out. And it's really a privilege to be the opening speaker and to set the scene of where we find ourselves, not just in South Africa, but in the world at the moment. If you hadn't noticed, it is 16 months until the 2020s. Now, I know that that's not huge news for some of you because you check your calendars every day, but we might not have clocked that we are in the future. I don't know about you, but the 2020s was always the proper future for me. You know, the 21st century, yes, it came and went. In fact, if you remember the Back to the Future movies, I'm seeing a few nods there, some people as old as I am. But back in the 1980s, when the future was the 21st century, in the second of those movies, Marty McFly, the movie opens as Doc comes back from the future in a flying car and picks him up, and they shoot forward into the future, a future with hoverboards and self-lacing shoes and all sorts of crazy technology. No cell phones, though, strangely. Which year did they go to? Some of you know this, right? Others are trying to work out. It was October 2015. So even Back to the Future is in our past. That's how far we are in the future already. And thinking about the 2020s, I think that there are three things we know for sure. There's a lot of stuff we don't know because crazy change is upon us, but three things we know for sure. The first is that you really only can know history for sure. Future is uncertain at all times. And if we look at our history, if we just look back over the last 10 or 12 years or so, we have lived through a period of absolutely remarkable change. For me, this is quite personal because my oldest daughter finished matric last year. And Amy, as she headed out of school and into her university experience, we reflected together on her 12 years since grade 1. And we reflected that on her first day of school, just 12 years ago, there were no smartphones. The first proper smartphone was introduced in June of 2007. That was the announcement of Apple's first iPhone. Now, I say it's the first proper smartphone, and I see a few of your faces going, I'm sure I had a smartphone before the Apple. You're thinking of a BlackBerry. Let's be honest, that was not and still is not a smartphone. Statistically, there's probably one person in this audience who still has one and is now hugely offended. The fact that you are the only person in this audience that still has one should tell you all you need to know. 12 years ago, the best phone you could get was a Nokia 3210. Some of you still here. I actually, a few years ago, I was clearing out a desk drawer and I found a Nokia 3210 in the desk drawer. It couldn't have been used for 6 or 7 years and it still had battery life. Which exactly is way better than your iPhone is today, right? Because by lunchtime, all iPhone users are going to be looking for a plug point somewhere. Now I can see who the Samsung users are because you laughed way too loudly at that joke. So for the Samsung users and your batteries, the fire extinguishers are there. There we go. Okay, so we've all got issues, right? Yeah, so we've all got issues. But 10 years ago, you had no thought that you would have a supercomputer in your pocket, because that's actually whatever it is you have in your pocket now, that's what it is, a supercomputer. 12 years ago, 2007 in June, when Apple held up this little iPhone and Steve Jobs said, "This is a phone." Everybody said, huh? Number one, what's Apple doing selling phones? You're not a phone company. Secondly, that doesn't appear to have a keyboard. That appears to be a piece of glass with some stickers on it. What's going on? Just last week, you might have heard Apple became the first company to be valued at $1 trillion, which, let's not even compare it to South Africa. That's more than the GDP of Indonesia. Unbelievable, right? But some people can see the future, and some people make the future. I think maybe Steve was one of those. Anyway, for the Android guys and the Samsung users in the house, we also didn't obviously have Android phones 12 years ago. Android arrived typically a year late. September 2008 was when Android devices came, and 10 years ago, Samsung would have happily sold you a fridge or a toaster, but not a phone. 10 years ago, if you wanted to use GPS like I did this morning to get here, you would have had a nice big device suction cup to the windscreen of your car, which you would have taken off the car and hidden away because you would have been nervous somebody would have wanted to steal it. It was that valuable. Today, of course, you used one of three possibly different map options in the palm of your hand, all for free, and you probably got a little bit frustrated that it didn't quite take you within 3 meters of the entrance of the theater. 20 years ago, GPS technology was military-grade secret technology, and now it's for free in your phone. 10 years ago, none of you would have done online shopping because Alibaba, who in my mind is something to watch. This is Jack Ma, the founder, who was in South Africa recently, actually. These guys only listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange in 2007, November 2007. So they haven't been around. When Amy was starting school, they weren't there. Amazon was there, but they were selling books, and they hadn't taken over the world yet. In fact, when Amy started school, you didn't have a Facebook account, because Facebook only became available to the public in September 2006, just nearly 12 years ago now. So I'm going to have to take this one out of this little example in a few weeks' time as it clicks over to its 12th public birthday, as we all got access to it. In fact, I could go on and on and on, because here's just a partial list of billion-dollar valued companies that didn't even exist 12 years ago. Isn't that remarkable? Some of those are obvious. They are the technology companies that we're aware of. The examples you hear at every conference. I'd be surprised if people don't mention Uber or Airbnb today. I mean, this is our job, those of us who do this sort of thinking and speaking about the future for a living. We are legally required to mention Uber in every presentation. I don't know if you knew that. But it is a requirement. So there's my tick there for the lawyers. But it's not just those technology companies. They're a real-world company. Well, they're all real-world companies, but selling real products, tangible products like Fitbits, or the Blue Apron that sells food in sort of one-size boxes. But probably my favorite on that list is Tesla, because the first Tesla, the Sportster, was launched in 2008, the first sedan in 2013. And now it is the most valuable car brand in the United States of America. And in fact, of course, there is one headed on its way to Mars in space already, thanks to a crazy lunatic Pretoria Boys High graduate. What a remarkable decade. I suppose that's the point I'm trying to just press home to us. That if we think back over the last 12 years, when we take that moment to reflect on it, we realize, good grief, just how fast has the world moved in the time that my daughter was at school. So let's put this into perspective. Today's grade noughts are the matrics of 2030. So when we're thinking about what type of world do we want to create, what type of country do we want to live in, if we're thinking about the kids who started school this year, we've got to be thinking about the 2030s and about what type of world we want to make for them. So the second thing that we know for sure is that as we think about the 2030s, not even the 2020s, I just think as we think ahead 12 years, I don't even think we can begin to understand just how much change we are going to have to live with. You know, if the last 12 years have changed dramatically, I think those 12 years have done nothing more than get us to the starting line of the technology revolution. In the next 12 years, the promise of some of these technologies, the promise of artificial intelligence, of real-time translation, of 3D printing at scale, of healthcare revolutions that will change our world, the promise of having supercomputing power in the palm of your hand, the promise of having everybody on the planet interconnected. These things we'll see the great good and the great bad that can come from it. And I think that if we're thinking about great bad, all we have to do is say 3 words: Trump, fake news. And you take out of those 3 words whatever you want, but things have changed, and they will continue to change. The founding president of the Institute for the Future, by the way, a remarkable organization for you to follow, highly recommend it. Roy Amara said this, that we tend to overestimate the impact of change in the short term. So I've still got an iPhone 7. And of course, the iPhone 10 is already out now. And I kind of think, really? Do I really have to upgrade? You know, it's been 2 years since I last upgraded, and is there anything really good about the new phone that's worth it? I'm kind of disappointed that things haven't changed fast enough. You know, Cyril Ramaphosa's been in power for how many hours now? And why hasn't the country fixed itself yet? So we tend to be sort of too hopeful in the short term and then disappoint ourselves. But when you look back over 10 years, you realize, good grief, what has happened? And what's the potential to happen? That, for me, is the promise of the 2020s. One of the most remarkable decades, I think, in human history lies just 16 months away. And it's up to us to shape it. And so that, for me, is the most important thing that we know. And that is that it is up to us to shape this next decade. If we're spending the whole decade just trying to keep up, as if we're being dragged behind a horse that bucked us off a few months ago, you're going to be pretty battered and bruised by the end of it. But if we understand what the 2020s can bring us, if we understand the potential that's coming our way, and we take hold of it, then we can actually shape it and form it ourselves. And it could be, and should be, one of the most remarkable decades in human history. And each one of us can play a part in making it so. So what I want to do this morning then is very simply give you 5 keys. 5 keys to unlock the greatness of the 2020s. Obviously, just as an opening speaker here, I'm not going to go into detail, but knowing some of the speakers who are coming and having an understanding of the agenda, many of the speakers are going to pick up on some of these themes and give you some more detail. But very simply this morning, just 5 keys, skills and habits that will ensure success for us in the next decade. The first of these keys is that we need to think more about the future. We need to switch on our radars. A radar is a device that allows you to see beyond the horizon. When there's clouds and everything's a little bit unclear, you switch on the radar and beep, 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 you begin to see where things are and where things are moving to. And this is something, although it's sort of in our consciousness, this is something that actually we're not good at. Let me just I could spend 3 or 4 hours just on this point and this slide. But just for the sake of making my point, here are a few technologies that already exist, are proven technologies, and are already beginning to, in many ways, have huge impacts on our world and the way that the world works. From driverless cars to flying cars, from changes in medicine, even down to personalized medicine and genetic engineering, which is allowing us to live longer. You've got robotics, and then you've got things like real-time translation and virtual reality, 3D printing, automation, artificial intelligence, distributed clean energy. And the list could go on and on and on. I've just now given you, I think, 10 in that list. But let me just quickly check where we are. So none of these things are new. I don't think any of the words I've just said are unfamiliar to you. But let me just do, by show of hands, how many of you have driven in a driverless car? Okay, so they do exist. Many of our cars now have the ability to at least park themselves and do lane assistance. You've probably got friends who've got cars like this, but as far as I can see in the room, nobody's done it. How many of you own a drone or have flown a drone? Okay, a few more hands going up. How many of you own a robot of any sort, from a Roomba to anything else? Okay, again, just a smattering of hands. How many of you have actually had a real-time translation interaction with somebody? So Skype right now can do real-time translation into 19 different languages. And you literally can speak, and the person on the other side hears something else. The Google Translate app in your phone, if you go into it, you can take the program that's in front of you, point the app to it, and choose which language you'd like to read the program in. And it translates into 67 different languages, as I checked last night, in real time on your phone. How many of you have used any of those functions? Okay, so a few people, about 40% there. How many of you have tried out a virtual reality headset? Okay, again, a few hands. How many of you have had anything 3D printed? Okay, how many of you own a 3D printer? Okay, again, a hand or two. Okay, so the point is, there's a smattering of people who have done a few of the things that we know for sure already are coming. And that list could go on and on, from how many of you have had your DNA sequenced and things like that. None of these things are expensive, actually. Okay, maybe a 3D printer's heading to the expensive side to own one for yourself. But to have something printed out, not so much. We live in a world where these are the things that are about to become commonplace. These are the things that are about to be normal, everyday things in your workplace, in your home. And depending on what companies you come from, these are going to fundamentally change your business. They're going to change what your clients and customers are looking for. They're going to change who's competition to you. And of course, they are going to change how you live your life. Now, you can either wait for them to arrive, and you can be the last person in your friendship circle to get one. You might even resist it for a time if you want to. Or you can switch your radar on. You can actively change where you get your information. Pick up a New Scientist or a Fast Company magazine instead of just the SA Rugby magazine. Well, not instead of, get the SA Rugby one anyway. But just add something else. You know that you can go to YouTube, and it's not just for cat videos, right? There are actually fantastic channels about technology and the future and how the world is changing. Watch a TED Talk once a week. Do it with your family. In fact, if you're in a business, get your whole team involved. If you guys down in the front here were my team, I would allocate one of these technologies to each of you. You take virtual reality, you take gene editing, you take driverless cars, you take clean power. And then once a month, I would ask you to give us just 2 minutes. Not a long lecture, not a PowerPoint presentation, just bullet points. Come, once a month at our team meeting, we're going to have a 10 minutes from the future section. And we get 5 of you to give us 2 minutes each, 10 minutes in a team meeting, once a month. That's nothing. But if you do that, and if you encourage your family and your friends to think about the future as a normal thing to do, maybe if you're in a business, even make it part of their job description, that they have to think about the future. And we start our team meetings with a few minutes in the future. It will change your mindset. It will open up your vision. It will switch your radar on. Does that make sense? So the first thing is be more than just a little bit switched on about some of this future. No. Switch your radar on. Embrace the future. Now, the second key is kind of flows from what I've just been saying, and that is that we need to build a culture of experimentation in our organizations and our families as well. You see, a lot of companies, in fact, every single company I know in the world right now says innovation is important. They put innovation down as one of their key business objectives. But they're struggling to get innovation. Certainly they're struggling to get innovation by design and on demand, because they think that innovation can just be commanded. The CEO sends a memo, we need innovation. And 3 months later, innovation happens. It doesn't work that way, obviously. What innovation is not something you can plan. Innovation is the result. It's the result of building a culture of innovation. It's kind of like seeds growing. You don't take a handful of seeds and look at them and say, I command you to grow. I have sent the email. It is time to grow. No, what you do is you put those seeds into the ground. You don't then shout at them every day and have a meeting with them once a week and say, why are you not growing? If they're not growing, you ask, well, why? What's the fertile soil? And by the way, a lot of stuff grows down into the soil first before you ever see anything pop out the top. Innovation is simply the outcome of a system. And the main part of the system, the main part of the soil, that every single company that we would recognize as being an innovative company, the main part of what they have in their soil is experimentation. They are not scared to try stuff. They put resources, they put time, they put budget into giving it a go, trying things. Almost every innovative company has got more failures than they have successes. But they are prepared to have lots of failures so that they can have the successes. And we need to be prepared to do that ourselves. Now, some of you, especially those of you who are in leadership or executive positions, are thinking right now, I'm not even going to write this point down, because if anybody in my business does any experiments, they are going to burn the place down. And I don't want that to happen. And I agree, I don't want that to happen either. If you're thinking that way, you're misunderstanding me. I don't want you to be thinking about big, huge experiments. You know, random examples. A South African telecoms company opening up a branch in Nigeria. Or a big retailer opening up a branch in Nigeria. Maybe it's Nigeria, I don't know. But that's a huge experiment, to open up a business in another country, to start a new product line. You've got business processes for that. There's due diligence you've got to go through. Don't mess with that stuff. When you hear the stories of the entrepreneurs today, you're going to hear the stories of hard work, of diligence, of good business thinking. So experimentation is not just, hey, anything goes. It's the Wild West out here. Let's do what we like. Because you can burn the place down if you do that. What I'm thinking of in a culture of experimentation is taking things inside your business, typically things that are frustrating for people, irritating for people, where people say, well, I know that this is what the book says, but the way we do it around here is, anytime somebody's saying something like that, you've got a moment where there's obviously something that's a pain in the system, and that's a perfect place to experiment. It's small things that won't blow the business up, but will do two things. First of all, they will solve hundreds of small little problems, which will add up to a big business benefit in the end. But more importantly, they will create a mindset of experimentation. A mindset where people say, yeah, we can and should and enjoy trying things. A simple example. Some of you are looking a little bit lost. Let me get out of the theory into the practice. In your businesses, how many of your businesses can honestly say that you do meetings brilliantly? Okay, so you recognize this then? Yeah, okay. Now maybe it's not quite as bad as this, but you kind of, by not raising your hand, you're saying to me there's room for improvement in your meetings, right? Agreed? So now, second question. How many of your companies, or how many of you are actively experimenting with different styles of meetings? There's a few hands going up. Your hand was the first to go up. Can you just shout out, what are you doing? Okay, and your experiment in meetings? Cool. So it's a particular form and structure that helps you structure a good meeting. It comes in a notebook. You've adapted it for yourself. Working well? Brilliant. Okay, and there were a few other hands, maybe 10 or 15 other people put their hands up, and there'd be 10 or 15 very cool examples. Very small, not going to blow any budgets, probably didn't even need a budget to start with, not going to blow anything up if it doesn't work. What are the rest of you doing? So you've said to me, this is a problem. Okay? Emails not working, meetings not working, don't like the cafeteria, parking spaces horrible, don't like the working hours, but I'm not going to do anything about it. It's a problem, right? Because hope and prayer might be a wonderful thing for you personally. It's not a great business strategy. So what are you going to do about it? Do you really think meetings are going to get better on their own? If you just leave them alone, they'll get better? Michael can tell you about medical conditions that don't go too well when you have that attitude. We need an attitude that is prepared to experiment. The reason we don't is because we are scared to fail. We need to be prepared to fail. You try something, it doesn't work. So somebody else tries it again and it might not work. I don't know, it might not work again. Don't be the last guy. Don't be that guy. Okay. So yeah, you don't want to get into a habit of failure. But we mustn't be scared of failure. And we mustn't be scared as leaders to be people who don't have all the answers, to be people who have great questions. This is one of my favorite scientists, a Nobel winner, Richard Feynman. He was a philosopher of science. That's what he said about science. Let me make it about leadership for you this morning. I would much rather work for a boss that has questions that are difficult to answer than work for somebody who has answers that are difficult to question. Build a culture of experimentation. The third thing you need to do is embrace disruption. And let me explain this one a little bit more clearly, because there's a lot of disruption going on, and there's a lot of technology change and technology disruption, but too many organizations are simply digitizing their existing businesses without disrupting them. Give you an example. Amy, matric last year, turns 18, says, Dad, I'd like a car. And I say, well, I'm not giving you a car. She says, but Dad, I can't afford a car. I said, well, sure. I understand it. I'm still not giving you a car. But Dad, I don't know. I can't get a loan. Can you get a loan? I'll pay you back. So anyway, we have this long negotiation. Eventually, we agree. I'll get a loan. She'll pay me back because obviously she doesn't qualify for a loan because only people with money qualify for loans. So I go out and I go to the bank and I say to the bank, now I've been with my bank for 22 years, right? I haven't borrowed a lot of money from them in that time. And I go to them and say, look, I really don't know how to borrow money from you. I hope you've made it easy. They say, oh, you're going to love what we've done. You just log into your online banking profile. There's a little button in the top corner called Apply for Loan. You click there, boom, it's that easy. Sounded great. The digital era is upon us. Excellent. So I did that. I logged into the system. I clicked on Apply for Loan. A form opened up, and the first question on the form was, what is your name? 22 years I've been with this bank. I am in my bank profile. The form is not pre-populated. They want to know my date of birth, my ID number, my gender. Okay, it's 2018, that can change, fair enough. So I fill in home address, physical address, I click the next button. I'm not lying to you. The next page was financial information, and the first question was, which bank do you bank with? At least their name was first in the drop-down list, not because they were ABSA, but because they had put themselves first. That's ridiculous, right? Finally, 20 minutes later, I hit the submit button. A little pop-up says, thank you for submitting your application. We will get back to you within 3 working days. First of all, I'm an entrepreneur. What's a working day? Oh, this was a Saturday. Anyway, Wednesday the following week, I get an email from them. Bang on time, 3 working days. I mean, why deliver early when you can deliver on time? And they say, congratulations, your loan is approved. But that is ridiculous. In the digital world, what information were they missing? What 3 days of thinking was required? I mean, this was a 3-second conversation between my computer and their computer, surely. But here's what has happened, and here's what many of you are doing in your businesses. You are taking your old systems and putting them online and patting yourself on the back and saying, I'm in the digital world. And you're not. We need new ways of working for a new world of work. Not the old ways of working in an app. It's a different thing. So if the third thing you need to do is embrace disruption, the fourth thing you need to do, and this brings us to the theme of today, is make a meaningful contribution. You see, when I was growing up and asked my parents, what should I do for a living? My parents asked, what are you good at and who's going to pay you to do it? And they forced me to go and get a profession. This is a little concept called ikigai, a Japanese concept around living a fulfilled and full life. And if you only ask, what are you good at and what will you be paid for, you'll end up being an accountant like I was for a few months. Then somebody started telling us we can also ask, do you love it? Is it a passion? Which is fantastic. And that's where some of those of you who were born in the 80s got to. So you're also doing a little bit of your passion, and that's maybe why you're in the room today. But today, in the 21st century, we need a lot more people who ask the question, does the world need it? Does it solve a big problem? Does it really make a difference? And if you get all 4 of those together, man, then you live. I presented this at a law firm in Sandton recently. One of the senior partners of this law firm said, oh, that is horribly idealistic. Surely nobody can achieve that. I'm never going to do work at that firm again, because my answer to him was, oh, so that's your problem. That's why your firm can't attract and retain young staff, which was the reason I was there. Because none of you believe that you can actually live the life that today's young people are looking for. So they're going elsewhere to look for it. Wouldn't it just be worth trying, at least? So the fifth thing that we need to do, I don't know why those other two came in there on their own, but the fifth thing that we need to do finally as I conclude is to realize that this decade we're heading into is going to require a new set of skills. If everything else I've said in the last 26, 27 minutes is true, then we are going to have to upskill ourselves for this new decade. But these are not the skills that you thought they were. Our team did some research over the last few years, and I think that's why I'm here on the stage, because the team saw this research. The question we asked was very simple. When the robots can do most of the work we're doing today, what can the robots not do? In other words, what's left for us to do? And I do think that the good news in the answer to that question is that it's the meaningful work. Robots don't care about meaning. Robots are good at process, procedure, systems. But the meaningful work, the work that is related to thinking about change, to being creative, to connecting with other human beings, to solving complex problems. Computers can solve complicated problems, but they don't understand complexity. Talk about, the land issue in South Africa, for example. The computer is not going to solve this, because there isn't a simple binary solution that if you just put all the pieces together, the solution is obvious. It's not obvious, because it involves people, it involves emotions, it involves diversity and connection and understanding. So these 8 sets of skills over here are absolutely essential for us to develop, because computers can't do this stuff. And the world needs this stuff. If you're interested, go and have a look at an online portal that we've created that outlines all of these 8 skills, gives you information about them, and even starts you on the way to developing them. The content, the research is available there for free. I'm not trying to sell you anything. It's all available at thefutureofworkacademy.com as we think about what's required for the 2020s. So, there are the 5 things, I think, 5 keys that we are going to need to survive the 2020s. The big question is, what are you going to do? These conferences are only valuable use of your time if they result in you doing something after them. I hope that as you sit here through the day, as you listen to other people picking up these themes, giving you insights, stories, and more detail, that your question will be, but what am I going to do in response to this? Unfortunately, I can't spend the day with you. I'd love to do that, but I'm not able to for a number of reasons. I'm just here for a brief time this morning. But if you do want to connect with me, that's how to do it. I don't necessarily answer my emails immediately, but I do answer all of them personally. Please feel free to connect with me. And that link down at the bottom is the best place to go. It'll give you a copy of my slides, as well as a copy of a book that my team and I wrote last year called The CEO Handbook, our gift to you for just being here today. Thank you very much for your time.